Giving up doesn't arrive like a storm. It enters like fog, soft, unnoticed, wrapping itself around the mind, until one day, the person beneath it can't remember when they last felt like themselves. Every human life has a moment where the world dims, not suddenly, but like a sunset forgetting to rise again. People rarely collapse loudly. They unravel in delicate, nearly invisible ways, in the long pauses between messages, in the quiet surrender of choosing silence over explanation, in the small habits created to protect a heart that learned to endure too much. This is the story of those habits, 7 silent patterns that appear when the mind is tired, when the soul feels thin, when hope flickers, not to mark defeat, but to show the hidden strength that keeps someone from disappearing completely. Before giving up arrives, there's a soft dimming inside a person, a flicker in the inner light, barely noticeable, like a star losing brightness in a sky too large to care. At first, nothing dramatic happens. They still wake up, still move through the day, still laugh when expected, but something subtle changes in the rhythm. Their steps feel heavier. Their mind buzzes with unsaid words. Their heart beats, but without direction. This is the first quiet shift. The body begins whispering truths. The mouth is not ready to speak. It shows up in small pauses, the kind that linger too long, in messages typed and erased, in moments when their eyes drift to distant places, as though searching for a version of themselves they misplaced somewhere along the way. Psychology calls this micro-withdrawal, the first layer of emotional fatigue. The nervous system, overwhelmed, starts to pull back from anything that requires more energy than the soul can currently afford. But spiritually, emotionally, it is something gentler. A person retreating to the quietest part of their heart to protect whatever strength remains. The 7 silent habits begin here, not as failures, but as shields. The habit of speaking less, the habit of overthinking more, the habit of avoiding conflict because the smallest argument feels like it might shatter something fragile inside, the habit of drifting through hours as if time has lost its meaning, the habit of doing the bare minimum because anything more feels unbearable. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of overload, proof that the person has been strong for far too long without rest. The first quiet shift is not surrender. It is the soul whispering, "I can't carry everything anymore." But inside this whisper is proof of life, proof that something within them still cares enough to fight, even if the fight is silent, even if the strength is fading, even if hope feels like a distant memory. The fading is not the end. It is the beginning of understanding what has been hurting and why. Silence has roots. It grows from moments long before adulthood ever arrives, before responsibilities, before heartbreak, before the world becomes heavy. It begins in childhood, in rooms where feelings were too loud for the environment they lived in.
The child who cried softly because loud crying led to punishment. The child who learned to stay quiet because speaking their truth brought confusion, not comfort. The child who became easy because their needs were treated as inconveniences. These early lessons teach a person how to disappear politely. A child who grows up learning to shrink does not suddenly expand in adulthood. They carry that early silence into every relationship, every fear, every choice. Psychologists call this learned emotional suppression, a survival adaptation. But emotionally, it feels like this: a child teaching themselves how to not bother anyone with their pain. One root is the belief that expressing needs invites rejection. Another is the memory of loving people who could not love them back the way they deserved. Sometimes the silence grows from chaos. Homes filled with shouting, doors slammed with disappointment, faces tight with stress. Children raised in chaos often learn to be caretakers of emotions they should never have been responsible for. This becomes the adult who apologizes too quickly, who forgives too easily, who holds the world together but forgets how to hold themselves. And when life becomes heavy again, the old silence resurfaces, familiar, almost comforting, like a childhood blanket that still smells like survival. So the 7 habits return: quiet withdrawal, avoiding conflict, overthinking, isolation, self-erasure, emotional numbness, and disappearing behind "I'm fine." Not because they want to give up, but because they were trained long before they understood words to carry their suffering quietly. But beneath every silent habit is a forgotten child who once needed to be heard, held, understood. Recognizing this origin does not change the past, but it softens the present. It lets the person realize that their silence is not a flaw. It is history. It is inheritance. It is an old coping mechanism that kept them alive long before they knew what it cost.
The mind is a guardian, and when pain becomes too heavy, it protects itself the only way it knows how: by withdrawing. Withdrawal is not giving up. It is the brain pulling the emergency brake to prevent emotional collapse. Neuroscience explains it beautifully. When chronic stress accumulates, the brain shifts into survival mode: less emotion, less motivation, less connection, less noise. The prefrontal cortex, which handles planning and decision-making, begins to dim. The amygdala, the fear center, becomes louder, and the nervous system, overloaded, starts shutting down everything that is not essential to basic functioning. This is where the 7 silent habits form. Habit 1: emotional dimming. Feelings lose color, not because the person doesn't care, but because the brain is conserving energy. Habit 2: avoidance. The brain avoids tasks not because they're difficult, but because each one feels like a threat. Habit 3: social retreat. Not from dislike, but from overstimulation. Habit 4: overthinking. A desperate attempt to regain control in a world that feels unpredictable. Habit 5: self-numbing. Not apathy, but a temporary anesthesia against overwhelming internal storms. Habit 6: identity drift, a feeling of watching their life instead of living it. Habit 7. Silent suffering. The belief that no one would understand even if they tried. These patterns are not choices. They are neurobiological responses designed for survival. The mind withdraws because it remembers how deeply it once hurt. The heart retreats because it learned that vulnerability comes with consequences. The body becomes tired because it has been carrying emotions too heavy for too long. And yet, in this retreat, there is an extraordinary truth. The mind is fighting for the person. It is saying, rest, pause, let me protect you. Withdrawal is not the end of hope. It is the beginning of healing. The body's way of creating space for something new to enter when the soul is ready.
There comes a moment when silence becomes too loud to ignore. The person begins to feel the friction between the version of themselves that once felt alive and the version that now feels dimmed. This is the inner war. Not dramatic, not violent, just a steady tug between exhaustion and longing. On one side, the part of them that wants to disappear into the comfort of numbness. On the other, the part that still remembers that life once felt warm. Psychologically, this is dual activation. Two opposite emotional systems firing at the same time. One says, stay safe, hide. The other whispers, you deserve more, try. But trying feels dangerous. Hope feels like a risk. Joy feels like something that could break if held too tightly. This creates contradictions. They avoid people, yet ache for connection. They want to rest, but fear stagnation. They want to speak, but their voice refuses to rise. They stand in the doorway of their own life, unable to step out, unable to step back. The inner war shows up in moments others never see. Sitting frozen on the bed, unable to start the day. Hovering over a message, unable to respond. Feeling tears behind their eyes, unable to let them fall. It is not weakness, it is conflict. The heart pulling in one direction, fear in the other. This war hurts, not because the person is broken, but because they still care. If they truly wanted to give up, there would be no conflict, no tension, no ache. The struggle itself is proof that something inside them still wants to live. And what is remarkable is that even in this inner battle, the mind has not abandoned them. It is trying to reconcile two truths. I'm exhausted, and I am not done. This quiet war does not end quickly, but it softens the moment the person realizes they are fighting not against themselves, but for themselves. Turning points rarely arrive with thunder. They slip in like dawn, slow, unnoticed, inevitable. One morning, the person wakes, and something feels different. Not lighter, but less heavy. A microscopic shift, barely enough to notice, but enough to breathe slightly deeper. Maybe they open a window. Maybe they reply to one message. Maybe they laugh without forcing it. Maybe they hear a familiar song, and for a moment, their chest warms. This is not recovery. It is recognition, a soft awareness that the silence they've been living in is not the only sound available to them. Psychologists call this cognitive re-emergence, the moment the brain begins to wake from emotional shutdown. It does not bring clarity, it brings curiosity, the first spark of maybe. Maybe things can change. Maybe rest is allowed. Maybe pain is not permanent. Life whispers back through small symbols, a sunset that looks like hope, a memory that stirs something tender, a stranger's kindness that feels undeserved but soothing, a thought that says, I want to feel alive again. And the person, slowly, carefully, listens. They begin noticing the 7 habits as patterns, not identities. They see the withdrawal. They see the numbness. They see the fatigue. And instead of blaming themselves, they finally understand. The turning point is not a breakthrough. It is a moment where the soul whispers, I am still here. A fragile, trembling reminder that life has not left them behind. In this quiet realization, the world does not become brighter, but they become more willing to look for light.
Healing never arrives with applause. It arrives quietly, as gently as the pain once did. The person begins returning to themselves, not in leaps, but in soft, cautious steps. They start feeling again. First discomfort, then sadness, then a flicker of joy that startles them with its unfamiliar warmth. The 7 habits begin to loosen, not because they force them to stop, but because the world no longer feels like something they must hide from. Isolation becomes connection, slow, uneven, hesitant. A message sent, a conversation answered, a willingness to be seen, even imperfectly. Avoidance becomes participation, not in everything, but in something. Small tasks completed, gentle routines formed, days that feel manageable again. Numbness becomes emotion, raw, unpredictable, but real. This is re-regulation, the nervous system recalibrating after long periods of overload. Healing is not linear. Some days the past pulls them back. Some days the silence returns. But it returns softer, no longer a prison, but a reminder of how far they've come. They begin grieving the version of themselves that suffered in silence. Grief is not a setback. It is proof of compassion, proof they are finally treating themselves like someone worth mourning. The slow return is not about becoming stronger. It is about becoming whole, reclaiming forgotten parts of themselves, allowing their own presence to be enough. The person begins to feel less like a ghost in their own life and more like someone who deserves to breathe fully again. In the end, this story is not about the 7 habits, but the person beneath them, the one who softened their voice to protect their heart, the one who carried too much but kept walking, the one who disappeared quietly yet never fully let go. Quiet strength is not loud. It does not shout its survival. It hums beneath every breath, every step, every attempt to stay. The 7 habits once looked like signs of defeat, but now the person understands they were survival tools, born from a history of hurt, kept because they once saved them. And now the same heart that once retreated begins to expand again, not into a triumphant roar, but into a steady, living hum. They no longer see themselves as someone who almost gave up. They see themselves as someone who kept going in the quietest way possible. Someone whose endurance did not need to be dramatic to be real. They realize that continuing is not about fighting harder. It is about noticing oneself, the breath, the pulse, the presence. The silence inside them transforms from a place of hiding to a place of rest. And they learn, finally, that survival is not loud, and strength is not always seen, and healing is not always visible. Sometimes, the greatest courage is simply staying alive long enough for life to reach back. And once life reaches, the person realizes they were never giving up. They were waiting, resting, protecting something sacred until they were ready to return. The story ends softly, not with victory, but with breath, not with triumph, but with presence. A quiet reminder: the human heart is stronger than its silence, and even in the darkest moments, some part of it still whispers, "Continue."